And thanks again for joining us here on the Gill Athletics Connections podcast. Super excited you would join us here today. I just want to take a second before we get to our awesome guest. Super excited to introduce today's guest for you. Hit the pause button on that. Before we get to today's guest, we have had just a tremendous influx of new listeners and watchers on the YouTube channel. And I just wanted to say thank you. If this is your first time, second time listening to the podcast, boy, your time and energy and attention to listen to our great guests that we have on the podcast means the world to us here at Gill Athletics. So I just wanted to say thank you. Welcome to the podcast. We are just getting started. You got a big catalog to catch up on of wonderful coaches if you want to go back and listen to some of those guys and gals. And we've got some future guests coming up that are just like today, going to blow your socks off. I'm just super pumped. And if you've been a listener for a while now, we started almost a year ago, January of 2020. Had no clue what 2020 was going to become, but we just knew we were going to do a podcast. I just want to say thank you again for listening and subscribing to the podcast. We've gotten as high as number 23 in the country here in the US for the running category on Apple Podcasts. That's amazing. We've been as high as 15 in Canada. All my friends up north must be bored because they're sitting there listening to my voice too many times, but go out and get a run in or something. But just want to say thank you so much. So now that I'm done with that, let's get rid of the pleasantries and have more pleasantries. So help me welcome today's guest, Mr. Kurt Downs. Kurt, how are you, sir?
I'm good, Mike. How are you doing today?
I'm doing really good. Thank you for your patience as I went through that diatribe of thank yous. Super excited for this. And yes, I know I say that for every guest, but I am super excited for every guest for all different reasons. This one, so Coach Downs, so Kurt here, you coach, you're Canadian, you're up in Canada, our friends up north.
Absolutely.
And you honored me and told me that you actually listened to our podcast. So you're one of the people that of many people that have lifted us up to the top 15 in the country. Thank you, Kurt. I knew it was all you. You just kept hitting press play, and got us up there, man. So thanks a lot for that.
Anytime, Mike. No, I think there's a lot of Canadians up here listening and looking for track and field things to do, especially in the current times. So thank you for doing it.
Thank you. Well, appreciate that very much. Certainly a country who has had a rich tradition in track and field, not to be lost just because you sit as the hat of the USA, who's had, of course, a great history, but many great track and field athletes from the country of Canada. One will specifically, and probably more, we'll be talking about in today's podcast for sure, Mr. Brandon McBride as well. So that'll be a lot of fun. I admittedly don't know much about the Canadian system. In fact, I think I told you earlier, I've never been to Canada. I think I actually did long time ago. I was in Buffalo for NCAAs, and I think a friend of mine took me across the border, but I think we literally did a U-turn. Like, I think it was just so I could say I'd been to Canada. So
yeah.
So I'm just going to go on record and say I've never been to Canada, never experienced Canada. And I know I didn't recruit when I coached. I didn't recruit hardly any Canadian athletes for whatever reason. So I don't know much about the system. Tell us, Let's start with you, because you're where you're at now actually runs right into that conversation of what the Canadian system is compared to the American system. Tell us where you coach now. What do you do? Talk to us about that.
Well, I'm the head coach of Border City Athletics Club in Windsor, Ontario, Canada. So we're about a stone's throw away from Detroit, Michigan, which has also had a pretty rich history in track and field over there as well. Right now we have a club of about 130 to 40 athletes and coaches, about 15 coaches. And it's a club that basically we started in 2013 that we rebranded from Dennis Farrell, who actually just passed away a couple weeks ago. He had started the Border City Athletics Club or track club in the late 90s, I believe. And with some pretty outstanding Canadians at that time, Mike Nolan, who was a decathlete, I think he was 10th in the world, Brian Gibbons, who coached me in college, and some other people had ran under that same brand, which Kevin Sullivan, I'm sure you'd remember, at Michigan there. I think he ran for the Border City Track Club at that point too. Yeah, so we rebranded it in 2013, and we've been going strong for 7 years here. We started with about 4 or 5 athletes, and we're doing fairly well right now.
So you talk about the club system, and that's like the one thing I know of the Canadian system is you are. Correct me where I'm wrong. Here's my
Yeah.
belief that
Mhm.
you guys are less high school and college institutional based. So there's less high school or college teams, and much more focused on the club aspect of it. Is that true? And where did I get it wrong?
Yes and no. So the club system is fairly large, fairly big. We have Athletics Ontario here, in Ontario, in our province, which is a very big club program, from what we call the PSO, provincial sport organizations. But there's ones in obviously every province in Canada. Um, but I'd say obviously Athletics Ontario is probably the largest. But in Canada, especially here in Ontario, we have OFSA. So OFSA is, I believe, the second largest high school track and field meet in North America. It is a very large meet. Usually, there's thousands of kids that show up to OFSA. Lots of Canadian coaches, U.S. coaches will come down and recruit there. So it's a very, very big meet. I'd say probably the second. I know I've read that somewhere, that it's the second largest in North America, from
Oh,
a
wow.
size perspective. So high school track is big, very big in Ontario. The university system is getting much better. In Ontario, we have the OUA, so Ontario University Association, and then we have U Sport, which is our national sort of governing body for track and field. Which often the championships, they move around, so they'll have once in Quebec, it'll move to Ontario. They can have it in a few locations. Windsor is usually hosted the national championships often, because we have one of the few indoor tracks here
Mhm.
in this city. But it's gotten much better. I mean, there's always been good athletes, a lot of great individual performances, but collectively, in the last 10 years, it's gotten very good, from a multiple school sort of standpoint. Often on par with a lot of lower Division I schools, and in some cases, performances that could rank on the national level, in some institutions, or from some institutions.
What do you attribute that to? You said recently it's kind of coming on like
Um,
gangbusters here.
I think there was a huge influx of good, talented young coaches, in the last 10 years. Plus, I think some of the coaches who had been there for a while, Les Gramantic, who worked with Mike Smith and Damian Warner recently, Jessica Zlinka, he's always done an outstanding job at Calgary, where he was. Dennis Farrell here in Windsor, had always done incredibly well. And there's Carl Jajeski in Toronto, Vicky Crowley in Western University in London. The list goes on and on, with fantastic coaches that have had some international success. In their event groups, or in multiple event groups at different points in time. But I just think the collective,
Mm.
group of them, plus some of the younger coaches. Right now we have coaches in Toronto, coaches in Guelph, some of the ones that I consider colleagues of mine. Bob Westman out of Toronto has done really well with his group of female sprinters. Jason Kerr in Guelph has done incredibly well with his group of sprints. There's a really good group out in Alberta that has done incredibly well, and Regina, Saskatchewan. There's pods popping up of outstanding young coaches. When I say young, I mean, probably 30s, 40s. But
Hey, that's young.
yeah,
As a
Yeah,
40,
exactly.
as a 40-year-old, that's young, my man.
I'm in that category now too. So yeah, it's just, I think that the coaching has elevated, definitely. So I think that that's a big positive for those performances.
Well, that's awesome to hear. I think, humans are humans, right? So the athletes are going to kind of be the same. They all have the same kind of potential in general, year after year, decade after decade. However, it shows the power of coaching. So when the
Hmm.
coaches get better, the athletes get better. The athletes were kind of always the same. Their potential was always the
Yeah,
same. It took coaching to bring it out of them. I just
yeah,
remembered, we didn't get to talk about this before we hit the record button, but one of the major influencers in my coaching life, so I coached for 10 years before I've been here at Gill now
yeah.
for 15, was I'm gonna say a young man. He was not a young man when I met him, Brent McFarlane.
Awesome. It's another example.
Yeah. Uh,
So and where was he? How did you meet him? How did you?
so Brent, wrote what I consider the Bible of sprints and
Yeah,
hurdles. Yeah,
sprints
right.
and hurdles.
And if
Yeah.
you don't know what I'm talking about, if you're listening,
Oh, I.
you have no idea, you need to get on eBay, Facebook. You need to try to find this book because it is the.
The funny thing is there's not that many copies out there, and the few copies I've seen recently have been like 100 or $200. Like
Oh
it's
yeah,
not a cheap. It's
no.
not. Yeah.
And it's worth every dollar. So when I was learning to coach, I got hold of that book somehow, and now will regret that I don't know where it is. I hope I passed it on to some coach at some point. But read it. That Spiral Bound. I read it cover to
Yeah.
cover 100 times,
Yeah.
and somehow I don't remember. I must have reached out to him to talk track and training and things like that, and he invited me. I think it was an annual event. He used to take his athletes down to San Diego
Yeah.
for their winter camp, around Christmas time. And I don't know why. I'm so blessed that he did, but he invited me to come out and work with his juniors and seniors
Yeah.
out there. So I flew to San Diego, which was, I was living in Kansas at the time, so it was
Yeah.
gorgeous compared to what the weather was where I was at. Never had been to
Yeah.
San Diego, but got to work with Brent, his other coaches, his athletes, who I can't remember any of their names. Of course, it was the 2000 year going into 2001. Another
Okay.
great coach that he invited that year was
Yeah.
Mario Wilson, who's now at University of Virginia.
Yeah.
That's how I
Yeah. I
got to
know
know.
Mario.
Yeah, Mark, great
Yeah.
guy. Yeah, so we got to. I mean, we were just, and Mario well enough that you can see
Yeah.
this. We were just sponges. I mean, Brent talked, and we just. I mean, it's
Listen.
like
Yeah.
writing down
That's.
everything, listening. Yeah, so just thought and think of the world of Brent McFarlane and what he did coaching, obviously, but also what he did for mentoring coaches out there as well. What a great guy. I don't know that and I know he's passed away, so maybe that's part of it, but yeah, I don't know that he gets his due. Like when we're
Yeah.
talking about great coaches, I don't hear his name come up a lot, unfortunately. And I tell you what, that guy, he did everything everybody else has done and much better. I'm not putting down people, but he did it at an
Yeah.
extremely high level. Brent was awesome.
No, he was an outstanding coach. I know when I was in high school, we always would do battle with that region, with the Kitchener Waterloo region, as one of those regions that we had to worry about. And he always had someone coming out of that region that was
Yeah.
a fantastic athlete.
I'll tell you,
Tomlin. I don't know if you remember him.
was he a
Dave
sprinter?
To- he was. He medaled at Pan Am's, or
Did he go to Kansas?
he did. He did.
Let me tell you a story about Dave Tomlin.
Yeah.
I'm glad you put a name to it. I was going to say, so when we were out in San Diego,
Hmm.
Brent went somewhere to meet with some business thing, right? And so he put me in charge of Tomlin for the day, and gave me the workout. He wasn't,
Yeah.
it wasn't me willy nilly. It was like, all right, Mike, you do this, and
Yeah. Yeah.
I think it was some Fly 30 type stuff. And Dave got hurt. He popped his hamstring,
Yeah.
and I remember going, "Oh, I'm dead." This was my fault. Like I obviously did. Like I'll never be able to coach
Yeah.
again. I'm going to be in the
Yeah.
doghouse
You're
forever.
written off. Yeah.
I'm written off. I think I don't remember the story all that well, but maybe he didn't go back to Kansas after that or something. Like it was a
Yeah.
fairly significant injury for him.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah. Yeah.
I,
No, you know what? He was fantastic. And I think, I'm not sure he did go back.
yeah.
I can't remember, but he's now actually coaching, and he has a club. I think it's called Maximus. Oh, I can't remember the name of it, but it's yeah, they've combined, I think, two of the clubs, because the old Kitchener Waterloo Track Club is KW is defunct now,
Okay.
but they've started a club, and they're doing actually pretty good. Yeah, they're doing well.
Do you have contact with them, like email and?
You know what? I have the email of another person who trained, like who I competed around the same time as, who coaches with them. So I could get it for you for
I
sure. I
would
could for
love to
sure put
just
you in touch with him.
be able to tell
Yeah.
him, hey man, I don't know if it was me or not, but I'm so sorry. Whatever I did, I am
No,
so sorry.
I doubt he would. Yeah, he's a pretty good guy. He's an
Good.
awesome guy.
Good.
Yeah.
Well, we've been promoting on my Twitter. If you're not connected with me on Twitter, please do. It's
Yeah. Oh yeah.
at Mike Cunningham. But we've been promoting our future guests like Kurt today and asking for questions. Maybe the people who listen
Yeah.
on Twitter. So want to start with one of the questions we got from Greg Scott. He is Twitter is at Gregory McNeil. He asked about what was your do you know Greg?
Yeah. Oh yeah. I
Okay,
know,
good,
Greg.
good. It's not a bad question, so that's good. But he wanted to know, what was your inspiration for starting Border City Athletic Club?
Yeah. That's a good question. I was head coach and general manager of another club at the time in the city, and the way that I had gone away to World Juniors, I think, or actually, you know what? I had two kids that had been on the World Junior team, and I had met a bunch of coaches, U.S. coaches who I befriended. I went away to do my master's as a result of it, and came back and. I had got to travel to, I think it was World Juniors in Barcelona, and was put in touch with another group of coaches. And I started to just, think about developing athletes, how the ones had done really well, the ones I had coached that had done really well, ones that hadn't done as well. I started to think about reasons or possible methodologies for why. And I thought to myself, I kind of wanted to go a different direction, because I wanted to be in charge of how those athletes develop, from a holistic perspective. So that was one of the decisions, that I'd probably say the major decision and reason why I kind of branched off and went on my own with it. And at the time I wasn't sure I really wanted to continue coaching. I thought about maybe going back to basketball and maybe trying to coach basketball again, because I was doing that in the elementary school that I was teaching at the time. And then I thought, you know what, I'll give it a try for a year, sort of on our own. And kids ended up doing really well at our provincial sort of state-like championships. And then I was like, okay, you know what, I'm going to keep with it. And then, sort of that's how Border City came to be.
And this is my own question. I don't want to put this on Greg,
No, no,
because
not
this
at
may
all.
be a terribly dumb question.
No, no.
How did you come up with the name Border City? I think I know, but I want to make sure
Yeah,
we hear the story.
yeah, yeah. Well, in college and university, I was my head coach was Dennis Farrell, who passed away recently. He's also you might know him as Melissa Bishop's the silver medalist in 2015, I believe, in the 800 meters, a Canadian
Wow.
record holder, was her coach. So he was also our coach, and it was the elite club in the city at the time, maybe one of the elite clubs in the province. And they had the Windsor Legion, which was under it, and then they had the Border City Track Club, which the international stars sort of competed for. The senior international stars competed for. So when I had come back, I was kicking around names, and I didn't want to. I didn't want to start something that didn't have history or roots completely, but I kind of wanted to do something, on my own. So I was kind of paying a little bit of homage to him, but at the same time thinking to myself, when I rebrand it, it's going to be, sort of mine or ours, the group of people that I moved with. So this is a very small group of people that we moved with. So in my thought process with it, I just was like, okay, this kind of makes sense. Dennis is quite a large figure, success-wise in the country, in the province, in our city and town. It'll pay some homage to him, but at the same time, I can sort of spread my own wings under it. So I actually went and asked him if it was all right if I had the name or rebranded the name, and he said it was good. So I felt like I kind of had his blessing, and then decided, hey, all right, we'll sort of forge our own path with that name.
I
So.
love that. That's cool. That's a much better reason than I thought. I thought it was like, oh, it's on the border. So I just,
Well, I think that's how he
that's,
originally. I think that's how he originally came up with it.
yeah,
So.
that's how I would name stuff. It's like, oh, it's on the border. All right, make me a border. Greg had a great follow-up question from the inspiration of the club, which I appreciate you sharing with us. And this one truly does interest me. As a guy, I coached high school here in America and
Mhm.
college, and I did I can't even call it a whole summer of summer track where we had young kids all the way through high school at that one.
Yeah.
It beat me down. Great follow-up question from Greg Scott. How do you handle, and I don't want to say deal with, because that means like you're forced to,
Right.
you're lucky you get to do this, right? But how do
Mhm.
you handle working with the youngest kids? I think you said third grade, maybe is some of the youngest kids you
Yeah.
have, all the way up to not only 22, 23-year-old kids, but like high level 23 level, like, international level kids. How do you handle that spread of ages?
Um, I think being an elementary school teacher by trade helps with working with the younger athletes. It's what I see, every day. So that I believe that helps. At least understanding them and a lot of the development for them. Um, it is grassroots, but we spend a lot of time on, just basics of acceleration, basics of ground contact. We spend a lot of time on, they will do a lot of the things that some of the older kids will do in the sense of, prep for contact in the ground, just maybe at a little bit more of a rudimentary level. They will focus on acceleration, albeit they may not get out to 30 or 40 meters, they may get out to 10 or 20. So a lot of it is the same, but it's just scaled back for them developmentally. The principles I don't think change. For the older kids, it's a lot of expanding the program out for them. Some of them may have injury history. Some of them may be returning from college, and what college life is like. Obviously there's late nights and, there's early mornings and there's, all the other things in between. So you obviously have to keep those things in mind as well. When those kids come home, like right now, even though we're in the middle of a pandemic, there are kids that touched down yesterday. There are kids that came home last week, and a lot of that is just liaising with their coaches that are away, having contact with them and just saying, hey, what's Gage doing, or what's Chris Land doing when they come home, or whoever's away. Just saying what's the plan for them. This is what we have access to at this point in time. This is what we can do. I'll write down the times or the split times, flies, whatever it is, and I'll send them back to you. We had to adjust here or there. So a lot of managing those kids is that, unless they come home in the summer, in which case sometimes coaches will say, hey, I know what you're going to do with them. They're on your watch till they come back in September or in August. In some cases I will get full programs. Just depends. As Keba would say yesterday, it depends.
Yeah.
And then the elite athletes, it's a little different again with them in that a lot of them are with me for the entire year. So what'll happen is their program is a little bit more focused, a little bit more, planned, organized, I guess, and so to speak. And where they may go on training camps with me, or they may go, to compete internationally, or those sorts of things. So it's spread out, but I still enjoy even working with the little guys, like last week, because obviously we're in the red again here. So, and possibly moving to gray, which is our lockdown color. So with us, I still will go hop in and work with the little guys, the younger developmental athletes at different points in time as well. I still write the programming for them. They may only come to practice 3 days a week, but I still will write, essentially the program, one day of acceleration for them, one day of technique and ground contact type stuff, and one day of general strength / fitness type of stuff. So that's usually the formula we work with for that developmental age. Try to hit on those 3 systems.
As a coach of the young ones all the way up to the elite ones, what advantages as a coach is that for you?
I think it provides a little bit of a refocusing for me, because I think it keeps me humble in the sense of this grassroots. I still am working with them. Yes, we do work with some of the older and incredibly talented athletes, but at the same time, it's humbling in the sense of I still have a pulse on what the little guys are doing, on a weekly basis. At the same time, I think it keeps the general and the basic nature of what the older kids are doing as well in the forefront of my mind. Maybe the older athletes need their program scaled down. Maybe it is only 3 sessions a week. Maybe it's 2. Maybe it's 2. If the little guys are tired doing something, it's a very real possibility that the older athletes might be tired doing something as well. So I just think, having a pulse on both of them keeps, those developmental lines intact always.
I love that. I see a lot of times where coaches are trying to find the next, we used to call it the red pill, the secret, things like that. And in reality, they need to be better and more entrenched at the basics. And they think that's like beneath them. They get an athlete to a certain level and are like, oh, well, the basics don't matter anymore. I got to be doing this high level stuff. And in reality, a lot of times, even our elite athletes, they need more basics. You got to learn the basics before you can move up. So I love that with the younger kids, that kind of keeps you use the word grounded, like, oh, well, I know I can't do the high level stuff with them. Well, that helps connect you back to the higher level athletes of like, oh, maybe I still need to keep thinking about that for them.
Yeah. And I mean, I've been fortunate to be mentored by or be able to have contact with some really good coaches, ones that know way more than I ever will. The Kebas and Boos and Dans and those guys. I've been fortunate less at different points in time here in Canada, Glenroy as well. So a lot of times, they'll remind me of those things. So I've been fortunate enough to be able to tap into those types of people. So I think that's where a lot of that comes from.
Well, that's some pretty good people.
Yeah.
That's a pretty high level.
Some of the best people. Yeah.
Mount Rushmore of sprints and hurdles and power coaching right there.
Definitely.
The inverse of that question for me is: are there any disadvantages that you've seen coaching? Oh, I saw a smile. If you're not watching this on YouTube, he just had a little smirk there. This is going to be good. What have you seen there in that realm?
I've had colleagues tell me that you spread yourself too thin, that, you need to focus in on a group or 2 groups. So for me, that's one of the reasons why I stopped coaching collegiately a year and a half ago, was because I was spread too thin. Brandon had come back and I was working with him again. And Kelsey had a fantastic year. The girls who I'd worked with at the University of Windsor had outstanding year. And, I looked at it and I was like, okay, well, I'm the head coach of this track program, of this club program. And it's going to be impossible for me to go to Diamond League meets and run my spring foundations program with my grade school kids. I can't do that. And work full time. It's not going to happen. So I'm going to have to pick and choose what I do here. And I've been fortunate to have really good coaches work with me here at the club. Coach Rob Moore at Sandwich Secondary here is a fantastic guy, awesome coach. He has one of the elite programs in Ontario track and field. He's always winning OFSA championships. And putting kids on the podium there at his high school. And our club trains out of there. So, I've essentially at times passed it off to him to run that developmental program for me when, I've been in Europe or at a meet in the States at Clemson or someplace else, trying to get times for some of those elite athletes. So just sometimes I think that negative is just being spread too thin, with it. And those times you have to pick and choose.
Yeah, I could see that. Absolutely. Life's about choices, and
Yeah.
sometimes other people may not agree with those choices, but you have to make the right, at least in that moment, what you think is the right decision to make. Sure.
Yeah.
Twitter user at 12ochy, 12ochi, I guess,
Okay.
ask, what is the values of your program? So you've got your athletic club.
Yeah.
We know that the goal is to run faster or jump farther, depending on the event, of course. But what values do you instill into the athletes?
Well, one of the things I think is community. We are a club. We have pillars that we kind of were founded on, and one of them is community. One of the bigger ones is community, and we try to do a lot of community things. So we have giveaways where we'll purchase equipment and clothing and give it away. We just ran a girls can program here in the city where we gave 90 pairs of shoes away to young Black girls that needed it, and gave them a day of being introduced to athletics. We also we just ran a women's can program where we had 174 people register for it, where we used the funds from that to support the girls can. We had Perdita Felician moderated for us. We had Nia Ali as a special guest. Melissa Bishop was a moderator. We had Jen Saigo, who's the Raptors nutritionist. Sefu Bernard, who's the director of player development for the Washington Mystics in the WNBA. And a host of female head coaches and associate head coaches in Canada and the US. So, Dana Boone, Hillary Stellingworth in Canada here, Vicky Crowley, who was one of my mentors. Yeah, just a ton of outstanding. Amy Deem, who's another, I consider another mentor and a great coach. So yeah, we were very fortunate to be able for me to call on some favors and some people to come help us do that. So even as a small club, that was something outstanding that I think we did. And so that sort of community based approach or pillar is something that's big for us.
I love, it's one thing to say that. I love the action though. I mean, like concrete action of helping people that are less fortunate than us, inspiring and engaging people to see other people that look like them. Like, look, you can be successful as well. Is there a website people can go to check out this Girls Can program, or anywhere that more information?
Yeah, it's just on our website, www.bordercityac, all one word, .com. And if you just go to Summit Series, it'll say Girls Can or Women's Can, or it'll drop down to some of the things that we've done in the community where we are.
That's awesome, man. I did not think maybe one of the best things that come out of today's podcast was going to be from a user of at 12ochy. If you're listening,
I'm trying to think
they put their name as JCJM. So JCJM, thanks for that question. They also had the inverse type of question. So I love their question about your values. They also want to know, and this is, you're recorded, so make sure you think about this.
Yeah.
What's your favorite meal?
My favorite meal. Really? Okay. My favorite meal. That's a good one.
It went from values to value meals.
To meals. Okay. I don't know. Maybe something's gonna get dropped off for me or something. I don't.
Yeah, that's right. That's why I said think carefully. That's right.
My favorite meal, I would say, I'm West Indian. I was born in Trinidad. So I'm gonna say something ethnic, and I will probably say oxtail, peas and rice will
Oh,
probably
okay.
be my favorite meal.
Nice.
Yeah, with a little bit of salad.
Oh,
I'd
oh,
probably
look
say.
at the
Yeah,
healthy side of that. A little bit of
just a little,
salad.
just a
What
little bit.
what is, you mentioned West Indies, as
Yeah,
far as growing up, or being born there, and so having that
yeah.
tradition, some of that food traditions. What is Canadian food? I'm, here in America, it's
Yeah,
hamburgers. What's
yeah.
Canadian?
French fries. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's your stuff. You know what? I would say Canada is it's traditionally been a very large melting pot. When I say
true.
melting pot, I mean so many cultures.
Yeah.
At the school I teach at right now, we have Sudanese kids, we have Arabic kids from Malaysia, from Syria. We'll have kids from Italian descent, all over. So, I think that's pretty good representation of Canada as a whole. So I'd say that Canadian food is really whatever it
Yeah.
is in that ethnic area or group. At least I think that's what it's become.
Right.
I could say it's meat, potatoes, pasta, that sort of stuff.
What is the
But
poutine? Is that how you pronounce it?
poutine,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah, yeah.
poutine is very Canadian, especially if you're in Montreal, Quebec area. Which does have fantastic food, but also, I mean, again, I think that it's just a melting pot. So there's a lot of really good things out here. I mean, I love Nigerian food, Thai food. I mean, really, there's you can find anything, and same as it is anywhere in the States, probably
I
in a
was
lot
gonna
of
say it's
places.
funny. Down here we call ourselves the melting pot, right? America and things.
Yeah, yeah,
We were built on immigrants coming over. I mean, that's how we
yeah.
here in America. However, when I think of Canada, I think of that as well. Great sprinter Donovan Bailey, I think was
Yeah,
Jamaica. I think
Jamaican. Yeah.
a lot of
Hmm.
other Canadian sprinters had been born in Jamaica and other islands and such, other countries. One of my favorite people, it was Jamaican born, Toronto
Hmm.
bred, and then lives in New York, is the famed author Malcolm Gladwell. I don't know if you've ever heard,
Absolutely. Yeah,
who
yeah,
also
yeah.
an
Read lots
extremely,
of stuff.
yeah, I love all of his stuff. I can never
Yeah.
not recommend his stuff, but he's also a huge track fan. He
Yes.
he was a pretty good miler, if I know the story well. So I have been pestering him on Twitter. He's like my all-star. Like if I can get him on the podcast to talk track,
Yeah.
that'd be awesome, man. So yeah,
Just
think of Canada.
keep
That's right.
sending
Yeah,
him
yeah.
DMs.
That's it. That's it. But yeah, I think of Canada like that as well. It's like, what is Canadian food? Well, it's not. It's made up of a lot of ethnicities and their foods, which is much more
Yeah.
fun than just going to McDonald's and having a burger. So I enjoy that.
Yeah.
Oxtail,
Yeah. Peas
black
and
eyed
rice.
peas and rice. But is it
That's right.
black eyed peas?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. That's very. I'm
Yeah.
from Alabama. So that's kind of what we would eat. Is that kind of
Yeah.
stuff.
Yeah.
Never
Yeah.
had oxtail though.
You should.
I only had poutine when I'd heard about it and thought, what a ridiculous dish. So if you
Mm.
don't know what poutine is, it's let me make sure I get this right. You correct me, Kurt.
Okay.
It's
Yeah.
French fries. Uh, is it a certain kind of cheese? Is it
Yeah. It's like not curdled
right?
cheese. Yeah.
Yeah, some kind of white cheese. Boy, we can't even think of it. It's
Yeah.
crazy. And then gravy poured over it.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
I
Over
thought,
top of it.
yeah, I was like, what a ridiculous. It's not. Is it mozzarella? Maybe it's mozzarella.
I think it's curdled
Cheese
cheese.
curds. Yeah, maybe
Cheese
curds.
curds. Cheese
Yeah, yeah.
curds. Thank you.
And I'd heard about it. And I was like, what a ridiculous dish. And then one night I was at a hotel from traveling, and I was going through my Twitter, and two different Canadian athletes, and I can't remember one. The other one was Derek. I can never pronounce his last name.
Druin.
Yeah, yeah. Mhm.
Druin. Yeah. Yeah. High jumper.
Both posted about poutine, and I'm at the bar eating, and they have poutine for me. I was like, all right, well, I guess it's just fate. I have to try, and I tried it.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm not a gravy guy, even though I grew up in Alabama,
Yeah.
but it wasn't bad. But it's a very unique dish.
It is. I'm not a poutine guy either, but I know a lot of people that love it and swear by it.
So
That's what.
let's stick with your club here before we start to
Yeah.
learn more about how you got into track and coaching. Another Twitter follower, I don't know if they follow me or not, but Bob Westman. So he's at Long Sprint Coach
Yeah.
on Twitter. He asked, and this is interesting. So you coach, we're going to switch over to Brandon McBride here. So you coach Brandon McBride, great 800-meter runner, I think Canadian national record holder.
Yeah.
I think he broke the NCAA record, but was
Yeah.
second in the
He
race,
was. He
unfortunately.
was. He was.
I'll give
To,
a little background. So at that meet, so his coach in college was a combination of Steve Dudley and Houston Franks. I've had Houston
yeah. Yeah.
Franks on the podcast before.
Yeah.
Houston is a former roommate of mine, so we're dear friends. And so at that meet, I asked him during the warm-ups of the 800, I was like, hey, so how's everything looking? How's Brandon? Yada, yada. And he goes, man, don't tell anybody this. And, Houston, he's such a humble guy. I know he hesitated to even tell me this, but he's like,
Okay.
he goes, I think we're going to see the national record, the collegiate record go down.
Yeah.
And it did. Unfortunately, Brandon got second.
Yeah.
But he was right. Brandon did break the record. I think, was
Yeah.
it Jim Ryan's record? It was a
I
long
believe
standing.
it was. I think it was Jim Ryan's record.
Yeah, I mean, it's a heck of a record. So you're working with Brandon now. So tell us about working, and I know you have other phenomenal athletes as well. Brandon comes to mind because I used to coach at Mississippi State, and so I was a fan of his
Yeah.
because he
Yeah.
went to Mississippi State. Well, what's it like working with an athlete like Brandon McBride?
He's again, he's a very diligent kid. I know I've said this before when friends and colleagues and people have asked. He is he is very driven. He's a very, very meticulous person when it comes to his training and to working out. He is a steadfast believer of the workouts dictate what will happen in a race. So he is very big on wanting to be wanting his times to show in practice that he is physically ready.
Okay.
To be able to compete on the largest stage. So in that sense, he is an incredibly driven person. He's a little bit more of a mileage type person. He loves his long runs. Even though we try to keep them somewhat tampered, in a place where we both agree on mileage wise he should be. But he is he's a pleasure to coach in the sense of him being incredibly driven and knowing what he wants from a session. Whereas there's other athletes you have to convince them of what they should produce in a session, or try to get them to that place where they can produce a time or a performance in practice or in a session that's equates to whatever. But you don't necessarily have to do that with him. He will come to practice ready to be where he needs to be on that day and hit those times. And very rarely does he not. So I would say he's a pleasure in that sense. Absolutely.
So Bob's question was, and to ask this question, you kind of have to pigeonhole you a little bit here.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess, not knowing your background too much on your coaching style and preference, you're more of a speed and power type of coach. And you alluded to this, that Brandon came from, and I don't know if it was before Mississippi State or it occurred during Mississippi State, but more of a mileage, and not necessarily mileage, right, but higher weekly mileage than a sprint-based type program such as yourself. So how do you, when you're working with an elite athlete, when you're working with a high school athlete, maybe as a coach, you can be a little bit more of shut up and do what I say. Maybe.
Mm-hmm.
Now I'm saying that you still need to work with the athlete, but they're 14 to 18-year-olds. What do they know in regards to training more than a coach? When you get to college, maybe it goes closer to 50-50. You need to, you are still the coach. Here's my program, but you need to receive feedback and adjust your program.
Absolutely.
When you're on an elite level, when your paycheck, when your mortgage comes from, if I medal, I get to make mortgage. I get to eat poutine, or if I don't, I have to go to McDonald's. You as a coach, I would imagine, not having coached athletes at this level at all, so I'm guessing here a little bit, you have to be much more in an exchange with the athlete. So athlete here, Brandon wants to be a little bit more mileage. You are a little bit on the other side. How do you deal with that conflict? That's a conflict.
Yeah, you know what? I think it comes from the relationship you have or build with the athlete first. in Brandon's sense, we had a very good relationship for a long time. So, and it dates back to him being in grade 9, where he ran the 1, the 2, the 4, the 300 hurdles, triple jumped.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that.
Oh yeah. He actually was the OFSA record holder in triple jump in the 9th grade, I
That's a
believe.
great trivia question. I love
For a very short time. I think it might have been for about 4 jumps, or so three rounds.
Wait, 3 rounds, not 3 meets, not 3 years.
No, I think it was
3
but I
rounds.
mean, yeah, I think he finished second at that meet, but in any case, I think we had a pretty good relationship at that point. And it kind of continued on the way through, even though he stopped hurdling and sprinting with me and moved to another coach at the time. We always stayed close. And when he went away, at the time I was trying to help him decide where he wanted to go to school, and he was looking at a bunch of different schools. Him and his family, they chose Mississippi State. And we still stayed close. So I would still get the phone call when he would come home, and and that sort of stuff. So essentially, anytime there was a problem or things were going on that he didn't feel great about, I would get a call, and I'd help him talk it through with him.
Mm-hmm.
And
that engendered a lot of trust between you and him.
Yeah, I think so. I definitely think it did. So for us, I think the way that our relationship worked was we could always talk. So when he came back, and he came to me in that January or whatever it was, February, and said, Coach, I want to make a change. And because he kept kind of hanging out at practice more and more, my practice with the girls and that sort of stuff. And I thought he was just bored because he was home, and he wasn't in school, and he wasn't working on his master's anymore. So I thought he just wanted to hang out. But I wasn't, I didn't realize, he was thinking these things at the time, because I don't know if he wanted to tell me those things right then. Right. And so we started to talk, and, he said, would you coach me? And I said, yeah. So when we talked, I said, one of the things is we're going to have to come to sort of an agreement on mileage, on this type of mileage. Cause I said, I'm not necessarily a huge fan of it. And I had gone to a bunch of my mentors at the time and asked them, what their thoughts are on taking over someone like this. And at this point in their career, not, him being grade 9 and 10 when I worked with him,
right,
but, him now. They had said, you could do it. We think you can. We think you'd be diligent enough, and all those different things. So when we had that conversation, it was one of the things where I said, okay, maybe we'll cut a little bit of mileage, but we won't cut too much. And it's actually 2 people that the thought process stuck with me the most. It was Dan Fat. That I had talked to. And then also at the time, I'm lying, it was 3 people. It was Dan I had spoken to. I had spoken to Boo as well. And then I'd also spoken to, oh my goodness, coach at Indiana.
The head coach, Ron Helmer?
Yeah, Coach Helmer.
Mm-hmm.
We were in Indiana with the manual therapist that we were seeing, Brian Muir. Who's a good close personal friend of mine, and we had talked about it, and I said, I'm gonna ask him, his thoughts, mm-hmm. and because we were using the track at the time when we were out there, and between the 3 of those individuals and Brian, I was like, definitely I'm gonna do X. And what we did was we came to a decrease in mileage, and what we decided to do is split up his runs. Because when he was at Mississippi State, I know he was doing 3 8 to 10 mile runs a week, which I thought was a little bit exorbitant. Not at Mississippi State, but towards the end there, when I think he had turned pro. So I was like, we could probably split these runs into 2, and then possibly do a little bit of other stuff too. So, yeah.
So what I heard there, and by the way, great question, Bob Westman, for that, the conflict. How do you deal with that conflict? And what I heard you say, here's the words I heard you say through that explanation. We sat down and talked. We had a conversation. We had to come to an agreement. So I hear communication, not any kind of fancy, well, we had to agree on this many miles versus this many on track days. It was communication and trust. That was how you led this off with. To have trust between the athlete and the coach.
Yeah, and I think that it was those conversations were good. I think they were real conversations, and I think we had a pretty good agreement, towards the end of it. So, I think it's worked well since then. He's run well. He's been consistent. I just think that that seemed to work for us.
How has it been, kind of on that same vein? We don't talk about training too much here. There's some
Yeah,
amazing training podcasts. Of course,
yeah.
you alluded to Kaba's course that he had just a little while ago through Altus Coaching Education. There's Coaches Collab,
Oh
LLC.
yeah,
Well, I mean,
yep.
there's a lot of
All them
great
too.
training aspects. We work on we want to explore the person. So talk to me about, having such a high level athlete and having such an unusual year. So we were supposed to have the Olympics
Yeah.
this year, Canadian trial, the dog and pony show that we're hearing right now.
Yeah, yep.
How has it been mentally for you going through? So you were getting prepared for these meets for Brandon and other athletes.
Yeah.
How have you handled getting shut down and now having to figure out how to do training for next year and what things might
Yeah.
have popped up this year? How did that go down for you?
Well, it's interesting. Last year I had taken the year off of work. So I wasn't teaching that year. I'd taken the full year off of work in order to just coach. So we had a bunch of training camps scheduled and set up, meets in different locations. At first, we had thought about heading down to New Zealand or Australia for January or February. We had some contacts down there, possibly doing some meet series that they had out there, a series of meets that they had out there, and looking at that. And then we said, what, we'll save the money, we'll stay local. We had gone down to Clemson, with all the crazy stuff going on down there, right now, and talked to Coach Graham Lennox down there,
Mm-hmm.
and we were able to train. So we were like, okay, well, we're set up, we'll race a little bit, and then from there, Brandon was going to meet us. Actually, rewind. We were in Miami first. We went to Miami with Coach Dean. We were out there and we were training out there. Brandon came home, and the other group of us went to out to Clemson. And from there, we were going to come home for a bit and then head out to Florida. We were going to do Orlando, and then we were going to head over to Florida Relays, and and then we had a whole plan set up. And
I'll
then
say you had the whole plan, right?
Oh, yep. Everything was planned out. How many weeks, meets, everything, and then it kind of just it crashed.
Yeah.
So then I ended up coming home in March from Florida, just as everything sort of broke. And it was like, okay, is he going to race? Is he not going to race? Okay, we're not going to race him. What we're going to do is we're going to train. And what we tried to do was just find creative ways to do things, parks and different things, just try to be as creative as possible and try to keep him mentally in it. And then it was, okay, there's no meets and, and all these other things. And then we're like, okay, here's what we're going to do. We're going to shut down your season, but what we're going to do is we're going to train till X time, and then we're going to shut it down. And that's basically what we did. Because my thought process was, mentally, if you aren't training, yes, a break is good, but you're going to be so far removed from the rigors of getting up and being in a mindset where you're doing things towards a certain goal. So our goal mentally is, we're training till this date. Set that as a goal mentally for you, and then we can shut it down and take that mental break. The other thing I did with him was I convinced him to enroll in a few more courses for his master's.
Oh yeah.
So that he was busy, and he was doing a lot of schoolwork, and that kept him, because one of the things I find with professional athletes, especially since he's come home and and followed what some of the other athletes are doing, I think there's these large blocks of time in their day. They're not necessarily always volunteering. They're not in class. If there isn't a set goal for them of a meet at the end of the weekend or their block of practice or, things that provide some sort of normalcy for them. Although they're professional athletes and I know they're getting paid to do it, I think that, sometimes you run into that lack of motivation or you kind of plateau. So for me, I thought, okay, we're going to create our own sort of goals and that sort of stuff. So he enrolled in a few more courses and knocked some of his MBA out. So that was great, and I think he felt good and accomplished that he had, got something done, and I think that provided some sort of structure to the chaos that was going on with the pandemic.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say. It seems like humans crave structure when
Yeah,
we think we want to just always lie on the beach and do whatever we want whenever we want, but we do crave that. Oh, I need to be somewhere at 10. I need to accomplish something in a week. I need to
yeah,
have this goal. We're goal setters by nature, I think.
yeah,
So that structure, and you hit it right there at the end of having something for him to do, even though what he originally planned on doing, going to the Olympics and before that the trials, etc., was not going to happen. Well, okay, let's still have a plan. Let's still put a structure in place to be ready for what this year is going to give us, and then be ready
yeah.
for next year to still accomplish your goals.
Absolutely. And I think it kind of, it speared on to this year in the sense of, we were able to get him into an internship this fall, at a company, and that was fantastic. So he was able to continue on, and I think he's scheduled to graduate in spring. I think he has 2 classes left now. He just finished his last one a couple weeks ago, or a week or 2 ago. So I think that was good for him because that provided a little bit of structure for him this fall also, in that it was like, okay, these 3 days we're going and we're getting up and we're doing this. We're still not sure of what's left, or what's going to happen this
Right.
year, especially now that World Indoors is canceled this week.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah, because that was actually, we had refocused and said, well, we're going to race indoors and we may run World Indoors, because my thought process was, I don't want you to not be competing or training at a high level for more than 16 months or, however
Right.
long that period of time is going to actually be now. So I was like, okay, well, we're running World Indoors then. Because he's not typically a lover of the indoor season, but I'm like, we're doing something at an elite level. So this is the plan. But now again, change and flip the switch. So the school has been a needed, a bit of structure for him.
I tell you, you cannot be, this is my experience from coaching and then, knowing coaches of all levels. You cannot be a good coach if you are not flexible. And I think
No,
this year and next year coming up is testing everybody's flexibility, but you're coming through with flying colors. Good job.
you know what, Mike? It's actually, it's funny. We have this group chat with some of those coaches I was mentioning in this area that are at a couple of the universities that we always would compete against each other. And every day it's like, okay, well, this got shut down. What are your thoughts on this? Or this got shot down. We just rolled out Mondo. We're on the turf now, or roll out track.
Yeah.
Sorry. So we're
No,
and that's kind of where we're at. And I'll tell you this: we are currently training on the second level of a old department store, the second floor of an old department store. Which is, and we have 2 throws nets up. We have, rollout track that we just ordered. We have, like it's hurdling on carpet. But hey, I think, like you said before, you have to be flexible. You got to be fluid and do whatever you got to do.
Sorry, boys and girls, it's not always glamorous on the other side.
Oh, not at all. Not at all.
Well, thanks for explaining that. That was great. And, we're super excited to see Brandon and all your athletes do really well. So let's take a step back. Let's get in our Wayback
Yeah.
Machine here and let's learn more about you, Kurt, and how you got up
Sure.
to this point with all those great things that you've been talking about with Border City Athletic Club. So when did you start running track? Where I have to assume maybe it was in high school, but where did track become a part of your life?
Um, I started in grade school, actually. I had a teacher, Miss Sullivan, who, I always mention her as a person that kept me out of trouble. And
We always need that
uh,
person.
oh, absolutely, absolutely. I actually still keep in pretty good contact with her,
Wow.
and she's the one that got me into track and field. And I would get picked up 3 times a week. I think in grade six and seven, or 6, 7, and 8, and they would take me to York University
Hmm.
in Toronto, which is like the National Training Center.
Mhm.
And I was with a track club there at the time, and I would train, and I was actually a pretty decent high jumper. I think I jumped 183 in the 8th grade.
Now,
180.
as we get older, we get better. So is it really 173?
You know what? You know what? No, the reason there's a kid that he was even better than I was, and I think he jumped 86.
Wow.
So he was really good. Again, I don't know. I was just a tall, gangly kid.
Right.
But so that's what I did. They came and they picked us up and we went to track. I went to high school. I went to a prep school. Actually, you'll love this because you'll know the name. Justin Knight.
Yes.
We went to the same high school.
Huh.
Coached by the same group of high school kids.
Wow.
Really prominent high school in Toronto, prep school. We didn't have a ton of money, but it was there was kids that were able to get scholarships or bursaries to go to school there
Hmm.
if they showed some promise in sports or academics, etc. So I went there, and then after that, I kind of had a couple loose scholarship offers, nothing great.
So did
Um,
you stick with high jumping? Was that your main event?
Actually, I broke my back. I had some facet joint fractures. So I
Not,
stopped high jump. Yeah, yeah.
did you do it high jumping or?
I think it was just congenital. I think it was just something that I
Oh
had.
man.
I stopped high jumping, and then I
Oh,
started just sprinting. And when I was done in high school, we had done decent enough and had some decent performances where I got some not great offers, 30%,
mhm.
40% here, but it was just too much for our family to afford. So I ended up sitting out a year and going to a local university in the city in Toronto, Ryerson. And then one of my old coaches called and said, "Hey, there's a guy in Windsor, Dennis Farrell, who you got to contact." And I was like, yeah. Windsor, where's that? I think I've driven through there once or twice, and sort of thing. And he called, and the rest is history. I think I called him in July of that year. I think my application went in, and I was, accepted in like 2 weeks, and I was like in a car on the way there in like another week. It
Wow.
was one of those kinds of things, and I've kind of been here ever since.
What were you,
Um,
as you were going to school through Ryerson and trying to find your
mhm.
way, what were you thinking at that point for a career? It doesn't sound like coaching was necessarily
No,
an
not at
aspect.
all.
What were you thinking
Um,
for a career there?
Well, I wanted to go one of two ways. I either wanted to be an English teacher, or I wanted to do physiotherapy because I had spent so much time in physio offices and stuff because of my back. I had to
Yeah,
wear
right.
a back brace and all those things. I was like,
Mhm.
I wanted to do that. Pretty desperately. It was either, I know there's kind of polar opposites, language or
Science.
physio, but
Yeah.
but those were the two things I had in my mind
Interesting.
kind of set on.
Did the teaching, because spoiler alert, you heard him
Yeah.
mention he went on to become a teacher. He's a sixth grade teacher here.
Yeah.
Where did that come? So the physio makes sense to me. I see that a lot where people,
Hmm.
if they have an injury and so they have to go to trainers or physios, they then gravitate to wanting to do the same thing. They got helped by someone, so they want to
Yeah.
do that same thing. And helping teachers, I find a lot of times, someone in their family was a teacher.
Yeah.
Did that resonate with you, or how did teaching
Um,
come into your mind?
my I had an uncle who was a professor, or sorry, was a principal,
Wow.
and I had and my aunt was a EA. My dad also taught a little bit at at the college in Trinidad for a little while, but
Wow.
I wouldn't say it was necessarily from that. I would say
Yeah.
it was probably the teachers that I think had positive effects on me in my
Wow.
life kind of coming up. So, like Miss Sullivan, I had her three times in
Yeah.
elementary school.
I was gonna say that makes sense
Um,
because you talked about Miss Sullivan, and here we are
yeah,
years later, decades later, and you still not
yeah,
only remember her and her impact, but still have contact with her. I mean, I don't think
oh
I knew
yeah,
any of my elementary school teachers, so obviously had
yeah.
a strong impact on you.
Yeah, and then I
Yeah.
think in high school we had Mr. John at St. Mike's and Mr. Bergen at St. Mike's. Were two pretty influential people there. And then university is a little bit different. There's obviously the relationships are not the same with professors. It's not as intimate. You don't get to spend as much time with them.
Yeah.
But there was one professor here that was awesome, Dr. Andrew Allen, who was in the Faculty of Ed, was great as well. So instrumental in helping me get in. And one last one is a coach here in the city, Gary Malloy, who actually passed away a little while ago as well. He was a distance coach here, a high school teacher, and also worked at the university as well. And he kind of gave me an opportunity to volunteer at his school and
Awesome.
then coach at his at that high school there. And then he also helped me get my first head coaching and general manager job at the club in Windsor here,
Wow.
first time. So, but he was a teacher.
Mhm.
So I'd say that, yeah, that was kind of influential that grouping of individuals was influential in me becoming a teacher for sure.
So you mentioned you got accepted, and a week later you're heading over there.
Yeah,
As you started going through the classes and things like that, did you get to go back to start doing track as well?
I did. I
Okay.
did. I ended up running. I was just sprinting. And then what ended up happening was I think my third year, because in Canada it's a little different.
Mhm.
You can have 5 years of eligibility, um, as opposed to the
Mhm.
hard four that you have in the U.S.
Mhm.
And then the other thing is if you attend university in the U.S. and you come back with eligibility, if you come back with 1 year, you're often given two.
Wow.
As an example, like Kelsey Bockwell, she was at the University of Miami. Um, and she came home, but she'd had a full redshirt year. So when I had talked to Coach Dean, she wanted to do her master's here. So she came home, got enrolled in the master's program here, and then she has 2 years of eligibility. She still has
Wow.
one year
Huh.
left. She only used
Interesting.
one. So there is, some of those little
Yeah.
minute
It,
differences.
is there also I hear the term grade 13 a lot for Canadian high school. Is there an extra year of school on that side of it as well?
There used to be. So I went through and did grade 13 OAC, but then maybe 6 or 8 years after I had finished high school, um, they had gotten rid of it and made it the 12th grade. But
Oh,
what
okay.
happens often here is if you can prove that you needed an extra course, or maybe you have an IEP or something of that nature, what ends up happening is or maybe you struggled a little bit in your freshman year in high school, they'll often give you or grant you a semester. So sometimes you can get that semester in the fall
Hmm.
semester, or you can get it in the spring semester. But you can often get an extra semester here
Hmm.
to complete some courses. Um, so that often is that grade 13, but it's not a full year of you
Okay.
being able to compete and perform in sport.
I failed Alabama history as a high schooler, and so I almost had to do a grade 13 come to
Yeah,
Alabama.
yeah. Hey,
uh,
you would have fit right in down
I
here. It
would
would have
have.
been
Maybe
no
I'm
problem at all.
maybe I should go to Canada and become part of the melting pot.
You should. Hey, you'd fit in just fine out here.
So when did, as you're now going through your second school now, and you're working towards your degree, and you're back to sprinting, and we want to talk about what you were doing as an athlete, sprinting and things, but what were you, so you're teaching or physio, or you're thinking about teaching or physio, where did coaching start becoming like, oh, maybe this is what I want to do for a career?
Coaching didn't enter into my mind at all at that point.
Oh,
Not
interesting.
not not at all. The only aspect of coaching at that point that had come into my mind was the fact that I was working at kids camps in the summer.
Okay.
That was it. Apart from that, wanted nothing to do with it at any point in time. Just wasn't interested.
That's funny.
I was actually like vehemently opposed to it. I was like, I do not want to coach. I want nothing to do with it, sort of thing.
So tell me more about that then. What was the vehemently opposed to it for?
I just didn't, at that time, I didn't think that it was something that I could do, like myself. I was like, I thought, this is just not for me. Like I'm an athlete and, and after I'm going to go and do this, or I'm going to go and do that, but it's not what I want to do, I just, I don't know. I think a lot of times student athletes at that point in time are very, egocentric, and I would put myself in that phase at that point in time, in the sense of, I really only was like, probably not that I didn't think about other people. I don't want to give that impression. It's just that I really didn't think that I could do that sort of thing. I was really only like, I wake up, I go to school, I do this, I help, I can help people, I can do that, but I'm not thinking about doing anything else outside of what I'm doing right now.
That's interesting. I'm glad you were wrong about that, by the way. But
that's
interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
So take us through your athletic career. You said you were just sprinting, but I think you had said maybe something, you actually moved to some other events late in that career, that part of the career?
Yeah. I started as a 60 meter, and in Canada, so some history of the Canadian side, we run off distances here. So we'll run the 60, we won't run the 200, we run the 300. We won't run the 4, we run the 6. We don't run the 8, we run the 1,000.
Why? What are you doing up there?
The history of that, I don't know why we actually do it, but that's what we.
Wow,
that's just what we do.
I always question, like, I think the Big 12 has 1,000-meter race, and maybe JUCO, we used to have the 4x8 and things like that.
We ran
I'm like, why? We don't do this at any other. We don't do it at the NCAA championship level. We don't do it at the World Indoor and Olympic level. Like, what are we doing here, people? It's fine to do it every once in a while, but to have it in your championship events, this boggles me.
I think the Big 10 runs the 600 also.
Maybe
I think they contest the 6.
And someone either does or used to. So there's a conference, maybe in the old Big East, but there was a conference that did all, like, if you were not a middle distance team, you couldn't win, because they did like the 4, 6, 8, 1 DMR 4x8. I think it was the old Georgetown days when Ron was there, actually. Where it was like, dude, if you in Notre Dame, I think, was in it. If you did not concentrate on 400, 800 miler type people,
no way you're winning conference.
Couldn't win. No, you couldn't win. Okay, sorry. That just
no. All good.
So you run the 3, the 5, and the 3, the 6,
the 3, the 6, the K, Then they'll go back to the 15 and the 3K, but and all the field events are the same, minus we'll do weight throw as well.
Okay,
and then for a long time we didn't do we would do a pent here instead. So I think that's only recently changed a couple years ago. But so we do run the off distances. So I ran the 60, the 3, etc. I wasn't an outstanding, I don't think I ever ran to my potential. I also don't think I was, and I had great coaches. I just don't think I was coached to the ability that I had, or that I needed at that point in time. But I think I did okay. We won a national championship my last year here in Windsor, and at that point I had moved over to long and triple, and I had hied a little bit again. I was in a track and field practicum class, and I went out and tripled, and I think I tripled what would have been 3rd or 4th at nationals that year, just like by accident. Not, I think I just did it, and they measured it, and they're like, okay, you're done sprinting. And I was like, okay, so then after that I ended up long jumping and triple jumping my last year, and my 5th year, I think my 4th and my 5th year.
Wow.
So,
That's
and then
interesting.
yeah, and we at that point, something that's interesting that we kind of touched on earlier was that there's a lot of Canadian schools now that are in U.S. That are competing in the NCAA and the NAIA.
Yeah, I've noticed that. Yeah.
We were one of the first. So I'm actually an NAIA All-American in triple jump.
Wow.
Because at that time we had bought into the NAIA, and at that time I think it was just us and Simon Fraser
Yeah, I
in
remember Simon
BC
Fraser. Yeah.
that were in the NAIA. And since then, Windsor dropped out because I think at the time they said that the amount of insurance or whatever we had to pay, it was just too much. So we dropped out, and then Simon Fraser moved from NAIA, I think, up to Division Two.
Yeah, I think so. Yep.
And then I think UBC, not UBC, UVic, UBC.
Yeah, British
One of
Columbia.
the,
Yeah, I
I
think
think maybe it's UBC
yeah,
is in the NAIA or D2 now as well.
yeah, yeah. They're
I think
the
that
dogs or the terriers or
there's something,
some
yeah,
kind of dog. Yeah. Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
yeah. And I think that UVic maybe is thinking about it now,
Okay.
or one of the other ones. Yeah, I'm trying to
Yeah.
think of the third. Yeah, so there's a couple of those Canadian ones that
Hmm.
have decided that they're going to do. I think from their standpoint, where they are, Seattle, Oregon,
Right.
are so close. It just makes logistical sense for them to
Yeah.
be involved in those areas, because truth of the matter, for them to come to Ontario for a national championship, it's a waste. To put 30 or 40 people on a flight, come out
Hmm.
here, just it's doesn't make sense.
Right.
Budgetary wise, it's whatever.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Hmm.
So then I ended up doing that, and then I think after that I wanted nothing to do with track um, for a little while, and I had gotten hurt. I tore my knee, and I wanted nothing to do with track, and I got into teachers college, and I went into coaching basketball
Hmm.
for a year. And it was the guy I told you about, Gary Malloy, that snatched me up and said, "Hey, you need to come help me coach." So that's kind of how I got in it.
So it's interesting. You have a story that if we didn't talk about what you do with Border City and Brandon and all those great athletes, this could be almost heard of a story as someone who I'm gonna use the hate word here, hates track. Some of the you mentioned some setbacks and stuff like that.
Yeah.
However, not only we know you've not only not hated track, you've embraced it as a coach and are doing wonderful things. Does the history of some of the injuries and maybe some of I'm putting words in your mouth here a little bit, the disappointment of some of your performances, you talked about not necessarily being coached up in the sprints to where you now can look back and see what you were doing. Does some of that fuel how you coach?
Yeah, I think it does. I think anyone who has setbacks normally realigns where they are, and thinks, how could they be better, or how could they provide an environment that's more conducive to coaching or learning or developing. So I do think that there is always that a little bit in the back of my mind, in the sense of what could I provide for an athlete, or for a grouping of athletes, that would help them get over the hump, or help them get to a position or a place where they could be successful, whatever that success looks like. um, you know um, I do think that that's something that probably sits, festers somewhere in the
Mhm.
back around there. Yeah,
Well, it's
absolutely.
clear from hearing your story and talking to you today and hearing about how that you and Brandon work through. And again, this is my word, I'm using that conflict word, just of, different styles and stuff. But
Mhm.
it's very clear that communication seems to be a large portion of your coaching style, if you will. Is that a cognizant choice, or is that just happenstance?
Um, I wouldn't say it's steadfast, a choice that I'm making to do that. I think that it goes back to a little bit of what we were just saying, that I wish that some of my coaches at that point did communicate a little bit better with me, in the sense of maybe explaining or expressing, positions, places, training. I often asked a lot of questions, and I don't always think that I got provided necessarily the answers for those. I think it was a lot of go do. Whereas now I think I try to provide a little bit of reasoning or methodology behind why we do something, or why not to do something. For instance, with Kelsey, since she's been home, we did the same thing as we did with Brandon. When she was in school, performed incredible. 52 point or indoors in the hurdle, in the 400 world indoors. She needs the structure. The years that she wasn't, in school or working towards a master's or a PhD or something, was a disaster. There's just too much time in the day for her. So, for me, in having discussions with her and talking with her, it's like, hey, I think that this is important to you as a whole, as a human. I think you need structure in doing stuff consistently on a daily basis, not just making it up as you go. Whereas, there's athletes who, I've been around and been fortunate to be around, like Alicia Newman. She was on a world junior team with me in Barcelona, and she is a free spirit. And as a coach, you have to understand that that's her. It's not a bad thing, but you have to understand that, she's in all these different places, but she's incredibly successful in doing that. Whereas, if you try to put the reins on her, there's no way that she's going to be successful. She'll push and fight back on that. Whereas, there's other athletes that definitely need that. And I think, I think that part of the communication you were talking about, I think is something that is important. That some athletes do need it, and maybe you have to communicate that to them in a way where they understand it and it makes sense to them.
Yeah, absolutely. And, shout out to Alicia Newman. She's a member of our Team Pacer vaulting club.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So we love Alicia, man. I had her on. We did a special October 6th is National Coaches Day.
Coaching Day. Yeah, I remember it. Yeah.
Alicia on there, man. She is, you described her really, really well. The free spirit.
She is.
Yeah. And I think, you hit the nail on the head there about the key to coaching beyond the knowledge level that you need to have. And there's certain levels of knowledge that you can have and still coach plenty of successful, like ultra successful kids. But the key in what you described there was learning the different type of athletes. And so I've got the honor now to interview 80 plus coaches around the country. And now you get, because of you, I now get to say around the world. 80 plus coaches around the world. I'm worldwide now, baby. And the theme that comes from the Brooks Johnsons, the Keba Tolberts that we've had, the Harry Maras, just, legendary names. The theme that I hear over and over again is coaching the person, not necessarily coaching the event. And so that key that you talked there about, learning the person. How do with Alicia, I know I can't do X, Y, and Z, but for this athlete over here, they need the X, Y, and Z, and learning that and learning it as quick as you can, because then it'll help you get more reps in with the right communication style is just so important.
Yeah, no, and I agree. Like I said, I definitely think if you're cognizant of sort of who's in front of you, it just makes it a little bit easier, taking the time to figure that out. And I think, like a lot of the coaches you mentioned, a lot of the 80 that have been on here have done great jobs of doing that.
Well, I tell you, as we wrap up here, Kurt, we did an hour and a half, man.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, I know. Didn't it go by fast? I
didn't.
I always warn people. I was like, I know you think 30 minutes is a long time. It'll snap. It'll be an hour before you blink. But I'm so honestly just happy that you would join us today. I'm pumped. I actually had put this out on Twitter about, hey, who are some of the people I need to interview? And someone, I wish, this is where I do mess up, I did not get the person that nominated you. Shout out if you're the person that nominated.
And that I'm gonna tell you, you should get in touch with him. It's Coach Radlin at GVSU.
Okay.
Yeah,
Oh,
he's a great,
I know
yeah,
him, right? Come on, man.
yeah, Ronaldo, yeah,
Ronaldo.
yeah,
So you
yeah,
know why I know him. See, this is great. I'm so glad you brought him up
yeah.
because I every show to plug the greatest university in the world, my
Yeah.
alma mater, Troy University. And
Okay, I didn't know. Okay, I didn't know you went to Detroit. Okay,
see, we
all
just
right.
learned, everybody. Kurt said he listens to the podcast. However,
Yeah,
if you listen, you know
yeah.
I'll forgive
Yeah.
you for not remembering every aspect
Yes.
of my life.
Yep.
I'll let you go on that one. And yeah, so I know Ronaldo from when he was coaching down at Troy University. I was
Got you.
extremely sad. I love him to death. I was extremely sad that he left
When he
Troy. He
left.
did go to Grand Valley, which, you know, JB and those guys are just,
Yeah, they do a great
boy,
job.
they do a
Yeah,
fantastic job.
yeah,
They
yeah.
really do.
Well, we race there all the time at those, because
Yeah.
they're right over the board. Well, not right now,
I was about to
but
say, where's that? Yeah.
yeah, in general, we often race, at Grand Valley and some of those other schools right over there,
Awesome. That's
Eastern
awesome,
Michigan,
man.
and
Yeah, great. You know, my former boss is the head coach of Eastern Michigan, Sue Parks. She was my boss at
okay,
Ball State. So,
yeah,
yeah,
okay,
if we sat down and did a roster list, we would know a lot of the same people, man.
okay, fair enough, yeah,
But Kurt, honestly, man, I'm just so thankful that you'd spend time with us today. You know, as we like I said, hour and a half, man, that's a lot of time to ask from someone. But I think, you know, it was just so interesting to hear your story, your background story of, you know, this a lot of times coaches will have these like miraculous career. You know, we love track and everything was perfect, and that's why I got into coaching. And so I love hearing that, those struggles and those setbacks, and yet you come through with flying colors, and you're a sixth grade teacher. I mean, I have so much respect for people who teach elementary school. I've got a fourth grader and a first grader, so God bless every teacher that is out there. In normal times, God bless you. In today's times, holy cow. So just so thankful that you do that as a career on top of
Thanks.
coaching an athletic club, a track club up there in Canada, and coaching some of the best athletes that we have. I love watching Brandon. I'm not not that 800 is a distance thing, but I'm not much of a distance guy, but I love when Brandon's on the track, I'm watching. So what's cool to
Yeah,
me is now every time I see him, I'll think of you. And so I'm just so pumped
thank
for
you.
that, man. So thank you so much for being on the show today. I really do appreciate it.
Yeah, no, definitely. Thank you for having me. It's exciting. I'm happy that you're now in Canada. And hopefully we can get some more listeners out here too.
I was about to say, you know, we were 15th this past week in Canada. If this doesn't drive us to number one, I don't know what will. Crying out loud. I don't know
Pressure,
what will.
pressure.
That's right. Exactly. I just get to blame you. I'm like, well, Kurt, you didn't bring your family. You got to let everybody
Yeah,
do this thing. All right.
I know. Fair enough.
Well,
Fair enough.
well, thank you so much, man, Kurt. Really do appreciate you. And listeners, that's a wrap, folks. Just want to thank Kurt so much, man. Your authenticity and openness to share with us means the world. That's why people, I think, listen to this podcast, is to see the real, authentic openness of people and coaches that we enjoy out there. If you've enjoyed today's episode, please consider subscribing to the show. And even more importantly, if you found value in today's episode, well, maybe other people in your network would too. Hit that share button. Let Facebook, Twitter, and the whole rest of the gang know all about today's episode and all of our wonderful guests we've had in the past here. With that, we're out of here, man. I'll see you next week. We're going to have another awesome coach. You're going to love that person maybe just as much as you do Kurt, man. So thank you so much, Kurt. Love you to death, man. Appreciate you. Listeners, have a
Thanks.
great day.
Take care.